On a hot afternoon in the fall of 1879, in a country school on the open prairie of central Kansas, a 19-year-old teacher named Clara Vance did the thing that the whole district would have forbidden her to do if there had been time to ask. And because she did it, 31 children who would otherwise have burned to death on that prairie grew up and married and had children of their own, and some of those children are alive today and do not know they owe their existence to a girl the school board had nearly refused to hire because she was too young and too slight, and they said could not keep order, let alone keep anybody safe. She kept them safe. She kept every one of them safe on the worst afternoon that country ever saw, and she did it by burning the ground on purpose while the great fire came for them across the grass, and I am going to tell you how, because it is one of the finest things a frightened young person ever did with a clear head, and almost nobody remembers it now. You have to understand the prairie fire to understand what she faced, and you have to understand it the way they understood it then, which was as the thing they feared above drought and blizzard both. On the open grassland in a dry fall, when the whole country was cured to tinder and the wind came up hard, a fire could start from a spark, a lightning strike, a careless campfire, a locomotive throwing cinders, and it would take the grass and run. And run is the word. A prairie fire before a high wind does not spread the way a house fire spreads. It travels faster than a horse can gallop over broken ground, a wall of flame that can be a mile wide or 10, throwing up a wall of smoke that darkens the sun, and it crosses the open country so fast that people caught in the open simply could not outrun it, and did not, and died. Whole families died in their fields. Travellers died on the roads. And the thing everyone on that prairie dreaded most, the nightmare that sat under every dry, windy autumn afternoon, was the thought of the country school, the little schoolhouse set alone out on the open grass, full of the district's children directly in the path of a thing that could arrive faster than a rider could bring warning. That was the country Clara Vance came to teach in, and she came to it about as poorly armoured for it, in the district's eyes, as a person could be. She was 19 and small and soft-spoken, a farmer's daughter from an older, settled county to the east, and she had never taught before, and the school board of that district had hired her after some argument, mostly because she would come cheap and no one better had applied. There were men on that board who said openly that she was too young for the charge of it, too slight to handle the big farm boys, too green to be trusted with anything harder than the alphabet. They gave her the school on a trial, half expecting her to fail at the ordinary work of it, the discipline and the lessons, and it never once crossed their minds to wonder how a slip of a girl would do in a true emergency, because they did not really believe her capable of managing even the small things, let alone the unthinkable one. What the board did not know about Clara Vance, because they had not troubled to ask, was that she had grown up on the prairie herself, in a county that had burned, and that her own father was a careful man who had drilled into his children, the way some fathers drill sons, the hard, practical knowledge of how you live through the disasters of that country. And chief among the things her father had taught her cold, made her recite, was what you do when the fire comes and you cannot run. Clara Vance was 19 and slight and soft-spoken, and she knew, better than any man on that school board, exactly one thing that would turn out to matter more than everything they thought she lacked, put together. The strangeness that got her talked about in her first weeks was small, and the district set it down as more evidence that the girl was odd and unfit, and I will tell you it now because it was not oddness. It was the whole of what saved those children. Clara Vance, in her first week at that school, before she had taught a single full lesson, walked the ground around the schoolhouse, and then did two things that no teacher there had ever done. She had the older boys help her plough and clear a wide strip of bare ground all the way around the schoolhouse and its yard, a burnt and scraped ring with no grass in it. And when the board member who farmed nearest asked her what in creation she was doing, wasting school hours on it. She said she was making a place the fire could not cross, and the man laughed and told it in the district as a great joke. The new girl so frightened of her own shadow that she'd fire-guarded the schoolhouse in September like an old woman barring her door against a burglar who wasn't coming. And the second thing she did was drill the children. She ran them over and over through what they were to do if she ever rang the bell in a certain way, a fast, wild, continuous ringing that meant one thing and one thing only. Drop everything and come to me at a run and do exactly as I say. And the children thought it a strange game, and the parents thought it stranger. A nervous girl playing at disaster, and the board wrote it down against her as flightiness. They did not understand that they had hired, without knowing it, the one teacher in that county who took the prairie seriously. What Clara Vance understood that the district treated as a young girl's nerves was the plainest and hardest fact of that country, which the people who lived in it had half-talked themselves out of fearing, because fearing it all the time was unbearable. She understood that the fire would come someday, not might, would, that a dry, windy autumn on that prairie was not a question of whether, but of when, and that when it came, it would come faster than warning, and that a schoolhouse full of children in its path would have only minutes, perhaps only 1 or 2 between the first sight of the smoke and the arrival of the flame. And she understood that in those minutes there would be no time to think, no time to plan, no time to run for help or run for home, and that the only thing that would save those children was preparation done long before, in the calm, when there was time, so that when the terror came, the answer was already built into the ground and drilled into the children, and did not have to be invented in the 1 or 2 minutes when inventing it would be impossible.
Her father had taught her the deepest rule of surviving that country, which was that you cannot survive a prairie fire by reacting to it. It is too fast. You can only survive it by having already done, in advance, the things that will save you. So she ploughed her ring and drilled her children in September, and bore being laughed at, and waited for a day she prayed would not come and knew someday would. She said it once to the skeptical board member, the one who had laughed at her fireguard, and he remembered it after, to his shame and to his credit, for the rest of his life. He had asked her, half teasing, whether she really thought her little burnt ring would stop a prairie fire.
And Clara Vance, 19 years old, said, "It won't stop it." She was quite calm. "It'll give me the 2 minutes I need to save the children, and 2 minutes is all I'll get." He did not understand her then. He understood her entirely by the end of that fall, and he was the one who told this story ever after, always saying that a girl of 19 had seen the truth of that country more clearly than he had at 50. Now, Clara Vance was young, and it was her first time at any of this, and I will not pretend her preparations were perfect from the first, because they were not, and the flaw in them frightened her badly and taught her the last thing she needed to know. Her first fireguard ring, the one she had the boys clear in September, she made too narrow, a good try, but a beginner's try, and she found out its weakness not in a fire, thank God, but in a hard blow that autumn, an ordinary windy day, when she stood at the edge of her cleared ring and watched dry grass and tumbleweed blow clear across it, across the bare strip she had thought was wide enough, and she understood, cold, that a fire driven by a wind like that would simply throw its sparks and its burning debris right over her narrow ring and catch the schoolhouse anyway, and her guard would have failed at the very moment it was needed. It shook her. But she did not abandon the ring, she widened it. She had the boys clear it twice as wide, and she cleared the schoolyard itself of anything that would burn, the dead weeds against the walls, the wood pile moved off, and she thought hard about what more the 2 minutes would need. And she made her plan better because she had found its flaw in a practice wind instead of in a real fire, which is the only safe place to find such a flaw, if a person is humble enough to look for it before she needs it. By that late October, the schoolhouse on its wide bare ring stood ready in a way that no one but Clara Vance understood or valued. And I will tell you how it looked to the district, because they looked at it and saw only a nervous girl's folly. It looked like a plain little country schoolhouse squatting inside an ugly wide circle of scraped bare dirt for no reason anyone could see, taught by a slip of a girl who made the children practice a fire drill for a fire that never came and had scared the little ones half to death with her wild bell for nothing. The autumn was dry and windy and beautiful, and nothing happened week after week. And the district was more sure than ever that they had hired an odd, fearful girl who would not last the year, and some of them had already begun to talk about who they might get to replace her. And the prairie all around lay cured and golden and waiting, mile upon mile of it, dry as gunpowder, under a sky that gave at last on a hot afternoon in the first week of November a hard south wind. The fire came out of the south that afternoon, and no one ever knew for certain what started it, and it did not matter, because by the time anyone at the school saw it, it was already close and already running. Clara Vance saw it first. She was at the window, and she saw low in the south a brown smudge on the sky that had not been there an hour before, and she watched it for the length of one held breath, and she understood exactly what it was and exactly how little time she had, because she had thought about this moment every dry, windy day since September. The smudge was smoke, and it was growing, and under it, when she looked hard, she could see the low line of it, the fire itself, and it was closer than smoke that Big had any right to be, which meant it was coming fast before the wind, straight up out of the south at the schoolhouse, and she knew, not the hour a person would want, not the 10 minutes a person would pray for, but the 2 minutes she had told the board member she would get, and no more. The fire did not care that the schoolhouse was full of children, or that the teacher was 19. But it had come, at last, to the one square of that prairie that was ready for it. And here is where the drilling saved them, because Clara Vance did not have to decide what to do. She had decided in September. She rang the bell. She rang it the way she had drilled them, the fast, wild, continuous ringing that meant, "Come to me now and do as I say," and 31 children who had practiced that exact thing until they were sick of it dropped their slates and came to her at a run, the little ones frightened, the big ones white, and instead of the chaos of 31 panicked children that would have doomed them all, there was a room of children who knew in their bodies from drilling that when the bell rang like that, they came and they obeyed and they did not scatter, and that discipline, drilled in the calm, was the first thing that saved their lives. She did not try to run them home. That was the thing every instinct in those children and every instinct in a person would scream to do. Run for home, run away from the fire. And it was exactly the thing that would have killed them all, because the fire was faster than any child could run, and it would have caught them strung out across the open prairie, and that would have been the end. Clara Vance knew that. Her father had taught her that. You do not run from a prairie fire across open grass, because you cannot win that race. She kept them at the school, on the bare ring, the one piece of ground for miles that the grass fire could not cross, and that was the second thing that saved them, that she had built in September a place to stay when every nerve was shrieking to flee. But the bare ring alone was not enough, and Clara Vance knew that too, because she had found out its weakness in the practice wind, and this wind was worse. A fire that big, before a wind that hard, would throw burning debris and sparks across even her widened ring, and it would fill the air over the schoolhouse with smoke thick enough to smother, and the heat of its passing could scorch and kill even across a firebreak. The ring bought the 2 minutes. It did not, by itself, save them. What saved them was what Clara Vance did with the 2 minutes. And it was the thing her father had taught her that the district would never in 100 years have let a 19-year-old girl do. And she did it without hesitation, because there was no one to stop her and no time to doubt. She set a backfire. With the great fire bearing down from the south, Clara Vance took the older boys to the north edge of her bare ring, the downwind edge, the side away from the coming flames, and there, on the far side of her cleared strip, she set the prairie grass alight herself on purpose with her own hands. And that small fire, lit on the downwind side, was pulled away from the schoolhouse, drawn toward the great fire and the wind, and it burned outward to the north, eating the grass ahead of itself, widening the bare ring into a great black scorched apron of already burned ground on the north and downwind side, so that by the time the main fire arrived, there was a vast burnt swath around the schoolhouse, far wider than any ploughed ring, ground with nothing left on it to burn, and the great fire, roaring up to it, found nothing to eat and split and swept around the black island she had made and roared on past to the north, leaving the schoolhouse and its ring and its 31 children alive in the middle of a burned and smoking prairie. She did more than the backfire in those 2 minutes, because a young woman who has thought hard about a thing thinks of more than one thing. She had a barrel of water and the water bucket, and she had the children soak rags and cloths and hold them over their faces against the smoke. For the smoke of a passing prairie fire kills as surely as the flame and faster. And she had them lie down low in the lee of the schoolhouse wall, where the air was clearest and the heat least, the smallest children in the middle, the older ones around them, and she moved among them the whole time the fire roared past, steadying them, because a drilled calm in the teacher is the only thing that holds a drilled calm in the children. The fire went by them in a roar of heat and a darkness of smoke that turned the afternoon to night. And it was terrible. And not one of those children died, and not one was badly burned, because a 19-year-old girl had built them an island of safety in September and had the nerve to finish building it with fire of her own. In the 2 minutes when it counted, I promised I would make the plain sense of it clear, and it is the same hard truth that runs under all the worst things that country could do to a person. You cannot beat a prairie fire by fighting it or by fleeing it. It is too big and too fast for either. You can only beat it by taking away the thing it needs, which is grass to burn, and you can only do that in time if you have prepared the ground before the fire comes and are ready to finish the job with a backfire in the moments after it appears. Clara Vance did not save those children by being brave in the instant, though she was brave. She saved them by understanding, months ahead, in the calm what the fire would require of her, and by doing the slow, unglamorous, laughed-at work of the fire guard and the drill when there was time, so that in the 2 minutes when there was no time, everything that needed to already be done was already done, and all that remained was to light one fire against the other and keep her head. The bravery in the instant was real, but it would have been useless without the preparation in the calm, and that is the whole of it, and it is why her father had made her recite it, and why she had borne being laughed at rather than skip a single part of it. Mind, it was a near thing, and she was lucky as well as ready, and Clara Vance said so all her life, and refused to be made into more than she was. If the wind had shifted at the wrong moment, her backfire could have turned on them. Setting a backfire is a dangerous act, and it can kill the one who sets it, and she knew it, and did it anyway, because the alternative was certain. If the main fire had come even a few minutes sooner, before her backfire had cleared its swath, the margin would have been gone. Some outbuildings at the edge of the yard burned. The schoolhouse itself was scorched, and one corner caught, and was beaten out. It was not a clean and bloodless miracle. It was a desperate thing done well, and with some grace to spare, by a frightened girl who had prepared for exactly this, and still very nearly did not have time enough, and she never once let anyone tell it as anything grander or safer than it was. When the fire had passed and the prairie lay black and smoking to the horizon, and the parents came riding wild through the smoke from every direction, frantic, certain, most of them, that they were riding to the deaths of their children, they found instead the schoolhouse standing in its black ring, and 31 children alive, sooty and shaken and weeping and alive. Everyone, and the 19-year-old girl they had thought too slight to keep order, standing among them, black with smoke, having kept them all. There is no need for me to describe what a parent does at a moment like that. Some of those men, hard prairie men who had laughed at her fireguard in September, got down off their horses and could not speak, and some of them wept, and the board member who had laughed the loudest at her bare ring stood in that ring and could not look at her for the shame and the gratitude both. He was the one who said it later when he could speak, the public apology that the whole district echoed, and that Clara Vance never asked for and tried to wave away. He said in front of them all that they had hired this girl, thinking her too young and too weak for even the small charge of a school, and that she had turned out to be the only grown person in the entire district who had truly reckoned with what the prairie could do and had quietly made ready for it while they laughed, and had saved all their children with her readiness, and that he was ashamed to his soul, and that he would be grateful to her every day he had left. And the district, which had been ready in October to replace her, kept Clara Vance as its teacher for as long as she cared to stay, and honoured her, and never laughed at a fire drill again. And the district learned, which is the best fruit of the whole thing. After that November, every school in that county and then in the counties around it ploughed a fireguard, a wide one, and cleared its yard, and drilled its children. Because the story of Clara Vance and her 31 went everywhere a story could go, and mothers made sure the school their children went to had a bare ring around it and a teacher who knew what the wild bell meant. The thing she had been mocked for became the plain, ordinary sense of that whole country, the standard practice of every prairie school, and it saved, over the years after, more children than anyone could count in fires that came to schools that were ready because a 19-year-old girl had shown once in the worst hour what ready looked like. I will tell you the last thing about the bell, because it is the part I love. Clara Vance kept that school many years and married a farmer of that district and raised her own children in it. And when at last she gave up teaching, the district gave her the schoolhouse bell, the very bell she had rung that November afternoon, to keep. And she kept it by her door the rest of her long life. And her own grandchildren knew that if their grandmother ever rang that bell fast and wild and continuous, they were to drop everything and come at a run and do exactly as she said, and she drilled them in it gently, the way her father had drilled her, because Clara Vance believed to her last day the thing the prairie had taught her at 19, that the fire, whatever shape it takes, always comes someday, and that the whole task of a life is to have done in the calm the things that will save the people you love in the 2 minutes when there is no time left to do anything at all. She was ready once when it counted, and 31 children lived, and their children live, and some of them ring a certain bell for their own grandchildren now, and do not always remember why the ringing means run to me, but it does, and it always will. Because a girl the school board almost turned away was the readiest soul on that whole dangerous prairie. Now, this teacher and her school are ours, but here is what is true. Prairie fires were among the greatest terrors of the settlement plains, and they moved faster than a horse could run, killing people and stock and sometimes whole families caught in the open, and the isolated country school in the path of one was a real and dreaded danger. The defences in this story are exactly the real ones. A ploughed or burned firebreak of bare ground around buildings, cleared of anything that would burn, and above all, the backfire deliberately set on the downwind side to burn away the fuel ahead of an oncoming fire so that the main fire arrives at ground with nothing left to consume. Both were standard, life-saving frontier practice, and a controlled backfire, though dangerous to set, was often the only thing that could save lives in the minutes before a running prairie fire arrived. And the deepest truth of it is real. Against a disaster that strikes faster than any reaction, only preparation done beforehand in the calm can save you. The girl and the district are imagined. The fire, the firebreak, the backfire, and the hard wisdom of readiness are exactly as they were.